Good afternoon, everyone. Hello. We'll get started in just a little bit. My name's Daryl Peterkin. I'm the NRHC Vice President, and I'm the moderator for your session. So as I say, we'll just get started in just a moment. And I'm just checking on a few technical aspects, and I'll be right back. Okay, just to make sure, our session is entitled The Right Stuff, the relationship between writing and learning. So if you think you should be in another Zoom room, now is your opportunity to switch out. We have three presenters this afternoon. Ryanne McGowan of Worcester State University will be presenting on college students' perspectives on audience. Our second presenter is Avery, Oldakowski, also from Worcester State University. Procrastination in first-year writing students, why getting work done is so difficult and how to overcome the urge to quit. And lastly, we have Kayla Juskavitch. Also, this must be the Worcester State panel, I guess. And she'll be presenting on, is writing natural or an innate skill? And how will the determination influence the inculcation of writing within education systems? So our rules are pretty simple. Each of you will have about 15 minutes for your presentation. And then we're going to save all of the questions to the end so that we have the maximum amount of time to address them. This session is being automatically recorded, so it will be uploaded to, I believe, NRHC's YouTube channel, so you can access it later, and anyone of your friends or professors who weren't able to attend should be able to access it there as well. We're going to follow the order of presentation and program, and so Ryanne, I believe it is your show now, so please, you have the floor.
Thank you. So can I share my screen? I have a PowerPoint.
Yes, you should be able to.
Can everyone see the PowerPoint?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. So I just want to introduce myself first. Hi, I'm Ryanne McGowan. I'm a freshman communication sciences and disorders major, and I go to Worcester State University. So I just want to give a little background about my presentation. So my idea was based around college students' perspective on audience. I wanted to look further into who college students invoke while they're writing. The two main things I wanted to get out of it was if and who their intended audiences were, and if there was a difference between freshmen coming in straight out of high school and upperclassmen who have had more college writing experience. I got the idea for it based off a book called Naming What We Know, which has threshold concepts of writing studies written by different writing scholars. And the two main threshold concepts that I based my survey around were that writing addresses, invokes, and creates an audience, and that writing expresses and shares meaning to be reconstructed by a reader. So I don't know about you guys, but in high school, I mainly just wrote an essay to have my teacher read it to get a good grade, and didn't really think much else about it, and really didn't think there would be anyone else who would read my essays. And so that based on a lot of research I did, a lot of college freshmen still thought the same way because that's how they thought in high school. But the research showed that students who took 2 or more upper level writing courses had a lot of similarities to published authors, and that there was a lot of growth throughout students' time in college, especially if they were taking English courses where they were receiving a lot of experience using academic writing, and that their writing was being shared to more people. Research also showed that audience is often overlooked by a lot of students and like before they go to college and are taught about it, but eventually it becomes a key factor to their writing. So going into my survey, I believed that the freshmen would have a lot of focus on their professor, but upperclassmen would have a wider variety of intended audiences, and that because they have more experience. So I just want to give a little background about where my survey took place. So it was at Worcester State University. It's in Worcester, Massachusetts. We have approximately 6,200 students, undergraduate and graduate, and there are approximately 70% commuter and 30% resident. So I unfortunately had a pretty small survey due to COVID because it was harder to find people to take it because there weren't very many people on campus and class size was a lot smaller. So I did 2 surveys. I had one that was for freshmen and one that was upperclassmen. So first I'm going to go over my freshman survey. I received 5 responses, and they were from all students in the honors program, but there was a wide variety of majors that answered the survey. So I first asked who the primary audience was when they're assigned a paper, and they were given the options professor, peers, experts in the field, or other, and 100% all selected that their professor was their main intended audience, which is what I expected based on the research I did before. So I then asked if you can have multiple audiences, and if so, who? And so all of them answered that you can have multiple audiences, and they were allowed to select multiple for this. So out of who I surveyed, 80% said another audience could be peers, 20% said experts, and 20 said anyone who is interested in the topic. And the next question I asked was, does your audience change based on assignment? And 80% said yes and 20% no. And I asked for examples of how it would change. And some of the examples I received were if it's a more personal, less formal essay, if there's a larger intended audience that you know that are going to read your paper, or if you're writing a paper that's kind of geared towards a certain demographic. And finally, the last question I asked was how they picture their audience responding to their writing. And they all said that they hope people would be engaged in their writing. They would learn from what they're writing about, and that they would also react positively to their opinions. So the next was my upperclassmen survey. I had 6 responses, and 50% of my responses were from education majors, but they all have different kind of smaller focuses and are going into teaching different things. So the first question I asked was who their primary audience was, and 66.7% said their professor, 16.7% said their peers, and 16.7% said experts in the field. Next was who are some secondary audiences, because they all once again answered that you can't have more than one audience. 50% said peers, 50% said experts, 16.7% said professor, and 16.7% said a general faceless public. When asked if their audience can change based on assignment, they all said yes. And then the last question I asked them was if their perspective on audience has changed throughout their time at Worcester State University. And this is probably the answer that shocked me the most, was 66.67 said that their perspective on audience hasn't changed at all throughout their time in college. Then I asked them to explain after that, and they said that they write for their professor or their peers, and that's it. There's nothing really about it. And then the people who answered yes said that they now gained a better understanding of audience, which is what I expected more. So that's why I was very shocked when I had a smaller number of people who answered that. So overall, especially with that question, I didn't receive my expected results. I think overall, even though it was a small study, I did receive a good understanding of Worcester State students' perspective on audience. My main goal for this was so I could bring it to some professors at Worcester State University, because I think that audience is often overlooked, and it was something that I did until I came and I took my honors composition class this fall, that it was always kind of just write to your professor who's going to be grading you and not really think of anything else. But it's definitely important to think of a bigger group of people, because a lot in academic writing, your professor is not going to be the only person to read your writing. And I think a lot of the negative habits almost we get about audience stems from high school, like I said, about just kind of writing for your teacher or writing for a grade. So I think this is good to show professors and students that there's definitely areas that we could improve on in our teaching of audience. And it also just shows students that it's something else to think about, because I think many students need to rely a little less on just writing for their professor. And just overall, audience is such an important part of writing. Like I said earlier in the threshold concepts, they're just like, not everyone is going to completely understand what you write, because readers will reconstruct the meaning of what you write based on their personal experiences, and that's something you need to think about. So I definitely think that college students should learn more about their intended audience. And I was definitely surprised that I received the results I did, especially in this last question.
Okay, thank you, Ryan. And again, we're going to save questions until your fellow presenters have also presented. But you've touched on some very interesting points here that I'd like to come back to. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, well, Avery, I believe the floor is now yours.
All right, thank you. Okay. Okay, so my survey, it's for the same project as Ryanne's. So mine's about procrastination in first year writing students. So I'm a freshman at Worcester State also, and I'm a math major. But so my project is about how first year students respond to their procrastination. So like, how do they prevent procrastination in their lives? So I'm going to go through how I did the study and the results and everything like that. So procrastination is a really common problem that can be really detrimental to college students. And to better understand procrastination, I asked myself two questions. So what are the main reasons that first year students at Worcester State procrastinate on writing assignments? And what do these students say are the best ways to avoid procrastination, and why? So some people say that procrastination can be beneficial to students' performances. So Tyson Baumeister, they say that students can work better under pressure. In their 1997 study, they looked to see how students were reacting to procrastination. And studies show that procrastinators can actually be healthier than non-procrastinators when deadlines are further away. So with the added time constraint, like with the time pressure that procrastination brings, students are able to evaluate their expectations, and which lowers the need for perfectionism, which can cause lower stress levels. In their 1999 study, Gabo and Schmolsky say that perfectionism and fear of failure are really common underlying causes of procrastination. And they give strategies to avoid this and give tips for teachers to help students avoid procrastination. Despite all the positive effects of procrastination, the cost of waiting until the last moment to do your work, like poor performance and significantly higher stress levels, they outweigh the benefits that could come from procrastinating. In their study, Tyson Baumeister say that students received significantly lower grades than non-procrastinators. And despite this overwhelming evidence that this and other overwhelming evidence that procrastination negatively impacts students' lives, students continue to habitually put off their work until the last minute. When trying to find tactics to avoid procrastination, it's really important to find ones that work with students' learning styles, their personal preference, and like the type of assignment that they have. So in this survey, a series of student responses highlight the main reasons that first-year writing students put their work off and what techniques they use to minimize their procrastination. So this is part of this was like a project during an honors course at Worcester State. And it includes responses from 16 students, and they were all first years. 15 of them were in the same honors writing course, and they participated because it was an assignment. And one was in a non-honors course, and she volunteered. So first, I did a Google form and I took a survey. And so first I took the demographics of all of the students. So like people's majors, which was a variety of majors, their year of study. And I asked these 10 questions in total. So after demographics, students were first asked how often they procrastinated, how long they generally put off assignments for, and they were asked to select all that apply from a list of reasons for procrastination. And then they were asked for a written response of their own techniques and if those techniques work and why they work or don't work. So the main point that was outlined by the results of the survey is that pretty much everyone procrastinates in one way or another. I don't think that's a huge surprise, but that was like the main takeaway from the results. When people were asked how often they procrastinate on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being never and 5 being always, 31.3% of students chose a 4. And the tied runners up were 3 and 5 with 25% each. And only 3 students chose a 2 or below, and the 1 is kind of, I don't believe it that someone doesn't procrastinate at all. Like, okay. But 81.3% of students responded with a 3 or above. So when people were asked how long they put off assignments for, the majority of students answered that they put it off for a few days before working on it. And 25% of students said that they put it off until the day that they're due. So there's still that one student that says that he doesn't procrastinate, which is definitely an outlier in my opinion, because 93.7% said that they do procrastinate. And I'm sure that that percentage would go up if I asked more people. So I then provided a list of responses and asked people to choose all that apply from that list of reasons for their procrastination. And the top 4 choices were that they have other work to do, they feel overwhelmed, they have a lack of energy, and they'll do it later. I was surprised to see that perfectionism and fear of failure were the 2 that when I researched, they were like the main underlying causes of people's procrastination. So I was surprised that they weren't chosen by more people, but still 7 people, almost half of the people that were surveyed said that that was a problem. When students were asked for examples of the techniques that they use to avoid procrastination, there were lots of trends that developed in the results. And 2 of those, the most commonly referenced techniques were to avoid distractions or find a form of motivation. So since it was a write-in, people wrote a variety of different responses, but they ranged from simple things like put my phone away to the more like threatening, more thought out, force yourself to think about all the bad things that will happen if you don't submit a passable assignment on time. So I was surprised that people were so hard on themselves, I think, about like as a motivation, but like a negative way of motivating yourself. So the other 2 categories that responses fell into were to set a schedule and to make a checklist. So 6 out of 16 of the students mentioned schedules, and 3 out of the 16 students advised getting started early on. I was really surprised that every response fit into at least one of these categories that I've mentioned, and a lot of them, like with longer responses, they crossed over into other categories also. So the next thing that you have to ask yourself is like, do these techniques actually work? So 75% of students said yes. There were 3 options. It was yes, sometimes, and no. So 75% said yes, and 37.5% of students said that their techniques help them become less stressed. And as you can see from all of these quotes, it helps students say that it helps them be less overwhelmed with all of the work they have to do. So every one of these quotes talks about how they were overwhelmed and procrastination, and their techniques helped them to be less overwhelmed. On the other hand, 25% of students said sometimes. None of them said no, which is good because they're their own techniques, so I'd hope that they would work. And one student acknowledges the benefits of getting their work done as soon as possible, but says that their mindset that they'll do it later lets them push it off until the next day. And I think that's a common trend among students. Most students focused on the positives of their strategies. Like students have a lot of work, so it's easy to see why the techniques wouldn't always work. So that makes sense that it's not 100% yes with these techniques. So most students admitted to procrastinating on a regular basis, but most had similar tactics to avoiding it. This is interesting because, as Kathleen Blake Yancey puts in Naming What We Know, which is the writing textbook that Ryanne also mentioned, although human beings often seem to engage in similar composing processes, each writer is unique. So similar to how students have common writing processes, students also have similar procrastination avoidance techniques. It's no surprise that students put off their writing assignments in favor of other easier work, because writing is hard. Shirley Rose, in Naming What We Know, says that the ability to write is not an innate trait that humans are born possessing. So it's interesting to see that students' number one reason for procrastination isn't perfectionism or fear of failure. Failure can actually be one of the most important parts of a writer's development. And two other authors in Naming What We Know, Colin Brook and Allison Carr, say that students must have the opportunity to try, to fail, and to learn from those failures as a means of intellectual growth. Thankfully, the majority of students don't find that their procrastination is caused by perfectionism or fear of failure, so they've learned this lesson that is really important. So how is this information useful? Teachers are able to see what lessons they need to teach their students. So by understanding why their students are procrastinating and how they're trying to fight that procrastination, teachers can shape their classrooms to their students' needs. So Gobo and Schmolsky provide ways that teachers can help their students procrastinate less, such as emphasizing process over product, helping students set realistic goals for themselves, and giving students time to reflect on their progress. This information can also help students find ways to avoid procrastination. By understanding the reasons tactics work or don't work for different types of students, this can give examples for other students to be able to help them try out new techniques or come up with techniques of their own. So this study, it's limited because it's really lacking diversity. They were all honors students except for one student. And this, it kind of shows that procrastination may not significantly affect their performance because they're all honors students, but that's not necessarily true. So it'd be interesting to see if these trends continue in non-honors students and a wider variety of students. Also, the group was really small. There were only 16 students. So it's not necessarily an accurate representation of first-year writing students. So to get a more accurate data set, a more accurate sample, we need more variety and more people. Because all the techniques fell under at least one of the 4 categories that I listed a while ago, it'd be interesting to see if that would continue for a more diverse audience, or if there would be more variety in answers of ways to avoid procrastination. So most students procrastinate in one way or another. The trick is to find avoidance techniques that work with your study habits, your learning styles, your personal preference, and the type of assignment that you're completing. For teachers, knowing the reason why your students procrastinate can help you to shape your classroom around students' needs. Although this study wasn't mainly about the effects of procrastination, these students' honor status doesn't necessarily accurately represent the consequences of procrastinating. Putting your assignments off until the last minute can negatively affect not only your performance, but also your health. And overall, procrastination is not good and you shouldn't do it. And you should do all that you can to find techniques that are going to work for you.
Thank you very much, Avery.
Thank you.
Also, some very interesting points about the characteristics of procrastination, but again, we'll get back to that during our question session. So I'm trying to hold all of that for that time. All right, well, we are now at our final presenter. Let's see. Yes, is Kayla here? No? Do you ladies know her? Did she mention that she wasn't going to be presenting today?
I don't know.
No? Okay.
She was planning.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Last I heard from our advisor, I thought, because he emailed all of us this morning.
Okay.
Just saying good luck, and she was included on the email. So last that I knew.
All right. Well, here's what we'll do. We'll go ahead and start working on questions. And if Kayla does come, then we'll give her an opportunity to do her presentation. Is that all right with everyone? Okay, so let's open up the floor for questions. You can also put them in the chat if you don't wish to raise your hand or what have you. But we're a small group, so please, let's open it up. Yes, Gabrielle, is that correct?
Yes, thank
All
you.
right, please go ahead. The floor is yours.
Thank you. So my first question is for Ryanne. So, like your study was limited by a very, very small sample size. I was wondering what you thought about, what your thoughts are on if the sample size was bigger. Like, how do you think your results would have changed? Would it have been by a lot or not a lot? I was wondering about that.
I am not 100% sure. It's just because I was trying to find upperclassmen, and as a freshman, I didn't know many. And my professor tried to send it out to his upperclassmen, but he couldn't make it mandatory, so a lot of them just didn't answer. So I would like to think that it would be pretty similar, just because I did have a pretty, well, at least with the upperclassmen, I did have a definitely a wide range of majors. With the freshmen, I'm not sure, just because similar to Avery's, it was all honors students, because he had two sections of the honors course and he had the other class um, answer that. So um, I'm not sure. That was my one thing I think it could possibly change, just because obviously it was all honors course, honors students taking an honors course. So they definitely probably have, because they were all reading the same text that I was, they definitely had more information surrounding audience given to them than possibly some of the other students taking college writing um, at the just normal level that our school offers. So I'm not sure exactly how it would change. I would definitely be, I talked to my professor about possibly post COVID doing a bigger survey to see if the numbers are similar.
Yeah, I mean, I would be very interested to see that. I go to Westfield State University in Massachusetts, so same state. But I work in the Reading and Writing Center at my university, and so both of your presentations were very interesting to me. Especially as a senior, just seeing perspective on audience. That's something that I don't think a lot of students take into consideration when they come in to an appointment with me. And when we do go through those discussions, I think it helps them a lot, and it shapes their writing very differently than if they're just writing for their professor. So I think that was very interesting for you to explore that in your own university. And then for Avery, both of you guys are really aware of sample sizes and stuff. So that's really great. And I wrote something down. Hold on. I was wondering if you guys had a reading and writing center that students regularly access. I didn't know if you had any information about that, or whether that might affect students' willingness to overcome procrastination by getting that extra help from an outside source.
Yeah, I know that we do have one. I don't know how active it is because I haven't gone to it, but I also do really procrastinate a lot. But I think that would probably help, maybe, because if you need to schedule an appointment or something, you need to have it done by the appointment. You have to have something ready for help you with. So I'm sure that would help at least some. I'm not sure how often people use it, especially now in COVID. I don't have any prior comparison because I'm a freshman. I haven't seen it for years and now notice that less people use it. But I know that we do have one, and I think that it would probably help.
Cool, thank you.
It looks like Jessica has a question.
Yeah, I'm curious how you formulated your project when you were first starting, if you came up with a hypothesis or an assumption that you wanted to prove or disprove, or did you start with a question? And that's for both of you.
I can go first. So, mine was definitely I think my question probably came first, because it was just basically from reading the Naming What We Know textbook, and really like thinking about audience. It got me thinking about myself personally, and I was kind of wondering like, oh, what do other students, especially because I actually talked to a couple of my friends about it who went to the same high school, and they all felt very similar to me. So I think that was the thing. I was like, oh, is it just my high school I went to that students think like this, or is it a bigger variety? So then I started asking a couple of my friends, even before we got assigned the project, because I was just really interested about it, because I had never really thought about audience that much. And then after my research I did when we were assigned the project, is I came up with more the hypothesis of that I thought that freshmen would be, just because I knew how I was, more focused on the professor, and kind of the same thing as high school, almost like writing for a grade and to please the professor. And I thought that the upperclassmen would be much more mature and experienced, and possibly have a wider variety. And I definitely thought that their ideas on audience would have changed throughout their time in college, because I know mine did, even just throughout my one English course I took in the fall, because I was given information on it. But I also realized, I think after that, could have, why it maybe didn't work out, was if I know not all my upperclassmen were honor students, so they might not have been shown like kind of the same things that I was.
Yeah, when I was, so it was for a project. So when he said that we had to come up with a question, I was like, I have no idea what I'm going to do, because I didn't really want to take something from the book that we were reading. So as I do, I waited until the last minute to come up with a question. And so I was like, I have a huge it's like a problem procrastinating. And so I was like, I want people to give me advice pretty much with this. I want, like, tell me what I can do. So that was mainly how I came up with it, is that I want people to give me examples of how I can stop procrastinating. It hasn't really worked. I was working on this today, but it's fine. So yeah, I mean, I expected that most people would probably procrastinate a lot, or just in general. Like, I was surprised that that one person said that they didn't procrastinate. Like, they really went against what I thought was going to happen. So yeah, mainly I was just like, I need help when I came up with my questions. So yeah.
Can you, I'm sorry, go ahead. Were you going to ask another question, Jessica?
No, I was just saying thank you. The responses are really thorough.
All right. I want to go back, Avery, to that student who says he or she doesn't procrastinate. Did you probe that a little more? What was the reason behind that response? You said you didn't believe it. So I'm guessing that whatever response you got didn't sound credible to you. Do you have any more information about that?
I mostly didn't believe it because of personal experience. Like, how can someone not do that? But I think that his response was like, just that he got all of his work done when it was assigned. I was like, what? Because it's hard to believe, because in college I feel like we have a little bit more work than we would have in high school. And it's like, if you do everything when it's assigned, like, there's not enough hours in the day. Like, man, it's just hard to believe. And like, when I read his like technique response, like, why, like, how do you not procrastinate? I wasn't like, I feel like I wanted more to know more, but it's like I couldn't really ask because it was all like kind of anonymous. So it wasn't as thorough as I wanted it to be, but also it's okay. So yeah.
Okay, thank you. And I certainly understand that both of you mentioned that you had small sample sizes, which, given that, you're dealing with an honors class, that is to be expected. And you both mentioned that you want, if you were to pursue this line of inquiry in the future, that you would certainly work on getting larger samples of students. But one of the things that I found interesting is that since you're talking about procrastination and you're talking about writing, and I think a bit of your study, Avery, went into, different writers have different techniques and so forth. So I'm thinking about, how do you two come together in this research? You, Ryanne, said that throughout the course of study, students really don't change the audience for whom they write very much. And when I listened to Avery's presentation, thinking about, okay, different writers are different. So it seems to me that writers do or should evolve over time or with experience with regard to writing. And I was curious about, why you didn't necessarily see that, Ryanne, in your research. Is that accurate, or have I just taken it a bit too far?
I definitely, like I said, that I was shocked when I looked at my responses, and most of them said that they don't change their opinion. I definitely think it could just be maybe they weren't exposed to information about it, which is why my main intended audience for my original paper was Worcester State, both students and professors, kind of just show students just how they can think about writing, and show them a lot of my research. And then for professors also, so they could possibly implement in their class different things to maybe make students think about it more. But I definitely think it's hard specifically with writing, just because I know everyone does have different styles and different kind of opinions on how best to write. So it's very interesting to look at it, because I definitely did not expect to get the answer on that question that I got.
Yeah, I'm wondering if it varies by assignment or expectation and anything like that.
Yeah, I know they all, I think, did say that they're based on assignment it could change. So I think they had some understanding of that, but they all just kind of said that it didn't change. And it was interesting. I think I could see it was possibly it would be interesting to more look into what I think grade each of them were in. I didn't really break it down that way, to possibly see maybe it was still the sophomores who are still learning are the ones saying that maybe that they didn't, and it's possibly the seniors saying yes. But I know specifically there's one senior who, because she took the survey for me, and then because it was someone I know personally, we were talking afterwards, and she even said, she goes, I never really thought about this, my perspective on it hasn't changed, and I'm a senior, and she's taken multiple English classes. So it's definitely interesting to look at and see. Maybe it also depends on what classes, possibly in the future, if I did it again, I'd maybe ask them about what specific courses they've taken here, because maybe certain professors or courses focus more on audience, but I'm not sure.
One other thing that struck me, and again, this is maybe something you can look at it in future studies. I would be curious to see what a breakdown of your results by gender and by race, if you could. So I wonder if different populations of students look at procrastination differently, or look at writing differently.
Definitely that was something, because I think I knew that my group was going to be pretty small. That was something I didn't really think about a ton at the beginning. And plus, I also kind of tied to Avery's, I procrastinated a little bit when making my survey and I needed the answers for the project. So it was definitely, it'd be interesting to look at that in the future and add more questions like that to get more of a background on who I'm surveying. Because I basically just said like, because all I really was thinking about at that point was more just like kind of, oh, what grade are you in? And like, I wanted to see maybe if it changed by major, but that's all. Because I think I was focused more on specifically more their academic experience, but I think it would be cool to look into if there was a difference between possibly races or gender in the future.
I think I see a joint paper in your future, ladies. Are you in the same class? Did I hear that correctly?
We were last semester.
Last semester. Okay. All right. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to monopolize the questions. Anyone else have anything they'd like to ask? Okay, well, I haven't heard anything yet from your classmate, so I'm not sure if she is, well, it doesn't look like she'll be presenting. And our conference officials haven't been able to reach her yet. So if there aren't any other questions, we can certainly close our session early. And before we do that, I'd like to plug the next NRHC conference for 2022. We're hopeful that will be an in-person event, and if so, it will be in the city of Philadelphia. So it would be wonderful to see you all there in this joint paper we just finished talking about. Hopefully we'll be one in submission. So watch your email and post social media posts for when our next conference will be. And I want to thank you all for such excellent presentations and being willing to accept questions and to answer thoughtfully. And this is what honors is about, to open lines of discussion and questioning. And the important thing is, not necessarily having the right answer, but learning how to ask better questions and engage people in discussion. And you certainly did that very well today. And you should be justly proud of that. And be sure to tell your director that I said that. And so if there's nothing else, I'd like to close the session. And again, thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of the conference, including the Zoom dance party tonight. So if you like 80s music, it's for you.
Great job to you both. Have a good day, guys.
Thanks, you too.
Thank you.